So I've made other videos where I talk about some of the more common causes for insomnia and sleep troubles, but I really wanted to dig into all the possible underlying causes that we see with our clients and that our coaches see around the world with their clients to help you really find some answers if you're having a hard time sleeping. I was an insomniac for years, and it just sucked. It was the worst. Like, it affects every aspect of your life. No matter what you do, if you're not sleeping, you're like the worst person at that. Like, you're horrible at whatever you're doing if you can't function as a human being. So I just want to dig into this almost like an insomnia course here in this video and really help you understand all the nuances of things that can go wrong, the mistakes that people make, and steps that you can take to figure out what's actually creating this problem for you and how can you fix it. Just so you can close your eyes at night and wake up in the morning. Like, the first time I slept through the night, I freaked out. I was like, what the heck's going on here? Because the sun was up. You know, I'm used to waking up 30 times in the middle of the night. I woke up and the sun was up and I was, oh, this is the morning. This is how this is supposed to work. So it can really be a life changer. Let's jump into this.
T.C. Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So just remember, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving anybody medical advice here because I don't know your situation. I couldn't possibly know what's going to be right for you. But we hear from a lot of people that say, either this medication I'm using is just not working for my life, because it'll knock them out in the head where they can get some sleep, but they wake up just exhausted and they're a zombie all day long because the body didn't actually get any sleep. They didn't correct the actual underlying cause of the problem that was creating the insomnia. They just knocked themselves out so that they could pretend to get some sleep for a little bit. Or they'll say, this remedy is not working for me, or this remedy worked for my friends, but it made me worse. And so we want to understand, how can one remedy, even if it's a natural remedy, help one person fix their insomnia and make another person where they're awake for 4 days. So we want to understand what's really going on when we look at insomnia. And to understand how to fix insomnia, you really need to figure out what's causing your insomnia. Because you're going to see when we go through this, the underlying cause for insomnia can really vary from person to person. So if you're going to try to use a remedy, you need to use a remedy that would address the actual underlying cause that's creating that insomnia for you. So when we're looking at different possible underlying causes that can create this, I'll say that the most common issue that I see is what we call a catabolic imbalance. So when we look at these studies here, we see on this one, insomnia and circadian misalignment, an underexplored interaction towards cardiometabolic risk. And in this study, they were really looking at the effects of circadian rhythm disalignment and insomnia and how that can affect cardiovascular issues. But this can still give us insights into insomnia, and they say that the circadian timing system is a complex endogenous machinery regulating nearly all physiological functions, including sleep wakefulness. And when we dig into this a little bit, you can see that this little circadian rhythm thing is about a lot more than just, are you sleeping or not? There's a lot of effects in the body that it can create when it's not working correctly. And they go on to say, hence sleep-wake cycles are vulnerable to circadian disruption, which therefore a risk factor for the development of circadian rhythm sleep-wake disorders. So they even say here, right in this scientific literature, that there are sleep disorders that come from a dysregulation in the circadian rhythm. These disorders are characterized by misalignment of the circadian clock regarding the environmental cycle, which tends to result in sleep deprivation, excessive sleepiness during wake hours, and insomnia symptoms. So when we're looking at this piece of information, it was Dr. Emmanuel Revisi who helped us understand that the body has this natural circadian rhythm at the cellular level. It's really about what's going on at the cellular level. And during the day, the body should be in this catabolic state where it's very good at creating energy and breaking tissues down and things so that they can be rebuilt and renewed. And then at night, we move into this anabolic state where the body is very good at sleeping and resting and repairing and rebuilding. So we see that both of those functions are very important. We need both of those things to happen. So the problem that occurs and that this study was explaining to us is that some people can get stuck in one of these states most of the time. Or maybe they're not really moving back and forth from day to night. This process, maybe they move a little bit slower when they're going back and forth. Maybe they'll stay over here for days at a time or over here for days at a time. And when that's the case, it can create a wide variety of health issues. When someone's really stuck in this catabolic state, we'll see things like chronic diarrhea issues because it can adjust where the body is sending most of the water. It'll send more of the water to the bowels and less to the kidneys. And that's not saying that all diarrhea issues are caused by a catabolic imbalance. It's just a possible cause for an issue like that. In this issue, we see constipation because more water is going to the kidneys. We also see other health issues that can occur, and we'll talk about some of those in this video as well. But you can see that this catabolic state is where the body needs to be to optimize our functions during the day. It really helps us be better at being active and awake and doing all those things that we need to do during the day. The problem is if a person is stuck in this state most of the time, then they're going to have a hard time sleeping because at the cellular level, their body's in awake. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. We got stuff to do. It's in that awake mode. And this was the main problem for me in my insomnia. I'm going to talk about another problem that I had going on too, but this was the main issue for me, is that I was stuck in this catabolic state. So no matter what I took, no matter what I did, I couldn't get the sleep that I wanted because my body was stuck in an awake mode. So that seems to be the most common imbalance that we see that's going to create insomnia. And a very close second would be this electrolyte deficiency issue. And this just means that the body doesn't have all of the minerals and electrolytes that it needs for the body to function correctly. The electrolytes are in charge of a lot of functions in the body. They also help us send signals from the body to the brain and from the brain back to the body again to say, okay, this is what happened. Here's how we adjust. It helps the body function correctly. So when there's not enough electrolytes or minerals in the system, it can create a wide variety of health issues. And usually this is the case because a person is having digestive malfunctions where they can't really pull all the minerals out of the food that they're eating, or they could be having other problems that cause the body to pee out more minerals than it really should. But in any case, we're seeing an electrolyte deficiency issue. And you can get an idea of where you are by just looking at your blood pressure. And this is not a diagnostic thing, but it can give you an idea of what might be going on in the body. And when we look at our blood pressure, if that top number, which is the systolic number, if that number is lower than 112, at least like 2 hours after a meal, you want to take your blood pressure at a resting time when the body's calm, at least 2 hours after a meal, but not first thing in the morning. And if that systolic number is less than 112, that can be an indication that there's not enough minerals or electrolytes in the system. So that can give you an idea of, well, let me look at that, and if my blood pressure is like 90/60, then that's way below 112. That's really a screaming piece of information to let you know that this could be part of what's creating this insomnia issue for you. And another common thing that we see with this electrolyte deficiency issue is depression type issues. And that has to do with an inability to send those signals from the brain and the brain back to the body like we were talking about. And we kind of see that when you can lift these mineral levels, a lot of people will feel a whole lot better. This is not the only cause of depression, it's just one that we see a lot. And what's interesting is when we looked on the Johns Hopkins medicine website, they were talking about some correlations between depression and insomnia. And they say that depression and sleep problems are closely linked. People with insomnia, for example, may have a 10-fold higher risk of developing depression than people who get a good night's sleep. And among people with depression, 75% have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. So it kind of gives you that idea, well, which one's really causing the one? Is it no sleep that's causing depression? Or is it something that's creating the depression that's also causing the insomnia? And we kind of view it more along that line. We view it more along the line of the body is getting a little freaked out about the amount of resources that are available to run all the operations that the body has to run at night. The body doesn't just go to sleep and it's done. There's a lot of functions that happen during the night. So if you're running out of resources, it's almost like the body is sending you a signal like, hey, we're running low on stuff. We need more stuff to make all this stuff happen. Wake up and go do something about it. Go whack a zebra on the head because we need this stuff. And the body doesn't operate on the foundation that you have like vanilla wafers in the cupboard downstairs. It operates that, oh yeah, you have to go hunt something down or find some berries or something in order to get the fuel that you need to function correctly. So when these things are going low, it can be really problematic. And we're going to talk a little bit about another issue now that kind of can go hand in hand with these low electrolytes, and that's hypoglycemia. And hypoglycemia is when someone is really processing their glucose a little bit too aggressively. They kind of process their glucose like their insulin is a bully. And when they eat carbohydrates or sugars, it really processes them too quickly, and then that sugar amount in the bloodstream can dip really low, and that can create a lot of symptoms. Well, one thing to think about with this scenario is that the body has the ability to kind of buffer things that are going too low. If minerals are going too low, those can be buffered as long as glucose is high enough. If glucose goes too low, that can be buffered if there's enough minerals to buffer that low glucose. But when minerals and glucose both go low at the same time, the body is viewing that as an emergency. So when I see a client come to me and I look at their body chemistry and they're like, oh man, there's an electrolyte deficiency thing going on, seems like they're processing their glucose a little bit aggressively, I'm like, yeah, you're not sleeping, are you? No, I'm not sleeping very well at all. It's very common to see this because there's no buffering system. So if they eat something that might be a little bit different, or they eat something that might make a sugar crash happen while they're sleeping, they're waking up because the body is freaking out about it. And if you can either balance out how a person is processing that glucose, or you can lift the mineral levels and give them a buffering system in either direction, all of a sudden they have the ability to sleep a little bit better. And what's really interesting about this is, we talked a minute ago about this circadian rhythm issue, and it makes sense that when somebody's leaning way too far on that catabolic awake mode, that they would have a hard time sleeping. But guess what? Sometimes we see people who are way too far in this anabolic state also having problems sleeping. And the reason that is because it appears that this state has the ability to really magnify how insulin is processing glucose. And a lot of times when we see people that are leaning way too far on this anabolic state, that they're really over processing that glucose and creating those hypoglycemic type situations. So if you can pull a person maybe a little bit out of this anabolic state, and you would think that the more anabolic they were, the better that they would sleep, but sometimes pulling them a little bit out of it so that they're not so extreme into that situation can actually help them sleep better, because now they're not going to process glucose so aggressively, and they can keep that blood sugar on an even keel. That's what we want to do. We want to not stress the body out by letting it know you have fuel available. It's all fine. Let's take a nap. Let's go ahead and have some sleep. And then it will feel better in that situation. So as odd as that is, that an anabolic imbalance might create that, we do see someone having insomnia issues when they're way too far in that state. We want the body to be able to move back and forth from the day in the catabolic state to the night in the anabolic state like it's supposed to. That circadian rhythm is very important for all of the functions that the body needs to operate to have go through correctly. An interesting thing about this correlation between the depression and the insomnia is that we also see this with anxiety. And with this study, the effect of anxiety and depression on sleep qualities with individuals with a high risk for insomnia, they were also seeing that while there's a really strong correlation, there's a much higher risk of someone having anxiety and depression. And when we're looking at anxiety, we also see anxiety with people that are having a low electrolyte level, where the body doesn't have all the resources it needs to function correctly. But we see another possible cause of anxiety being someone pushed too far into that anabolic state. Too far in that anabolic state causes the body to create more of its energy through fermentation. And when you create a lot of energy through fermentation, a byproduct can be lactic acid. And high levels of lactic acid have the ability to create anxiety and even panic attacks. So it's just interesting that the medical literature is showing that they see correlations with that, and we see those same correlations with our clients as well. Okay, let's look at this next imbalance, and I know I'm going a little bit fast on some of these things. If this is new information to you, if you're new to our channel and you haven't heard about any of these things, I'm going to give you a free resource in the description below. My book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, kind of walks you through how to understand these different imbalances that can show up in the body, how to do simple self-tests at home with tools you can pick up at like a pharmacy or a health food store to get an idea of where your body chemistry is. And are major imbalances showing up that really jump out and say, oh yeah, that's probably a problem. We even show you how to fill out like an imbalance guide to get an idea of what's going on. So we walk you through all that step by step, and I'll put a link so you can get that whole book totally for free in the description below. So that'll help you understand some of these things. So don't feel like you have to understand every single thing I'm saying right now. Sometimes I talk a little fast and yammer on a little bit, but I want to get through all these before it's time for you to go to bed and try and sleep. So let's look at this sympathetic imbalance that has to do with our autonomic nervous system. And also in this study that we looked at before, they also said that autonomic nervous system, or ANS, is kind of what they call it, has been pointed out as crucial key mediator that triggers cardiometabolic risk. Therefore, a critical review of the literature focused on the past 10 years was conducted to highlight the relationship between insomnia, circadian misalignment, and cardiometabolic risk, with particular emphasis on the influence of the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system is kind of this system in the body that runs a lot of the show behind the curtains. Like, you don't have to think about breathing, it just kind of happens. And it has two sides to it. It has this sympathetic, which is our fight and flight side, and it has a parasympathetic, rest and digest side. So we need to have both of those sides working. They're both appropriate. But people can get kind of stuck in one of these states just like they could the anabolic or catabolic state. And in this sympathetic fight or flight state, this is our emergency state. This is the state that the body kicks into when an emergency presents itself, some type of stress, like we're being chased by a lion. So in that scenario, the body's going to change how it functions to optimize for survival. It's going to change how we use or create glucose to have like an immediate fuel source to allow this body to function in a way that it can survive this lion chasing us down. It changes the way that things function so that it can prioritize survival over everything else. There's not a scenario where the body would need to optimize for digestion while it's running away from a lion. Like, you're not going to eat a sandwich while you're running away from a lion. Nobody really does that. So when it moves into this sympathetic fight or flight state, it's changing bodily functions. So think about how stress is really supposed to happen in life. It's supposed to happen about 3 or 4 minutes at a time. When a lion is chasing you, in 4 minutes that lion's either going to be tired or you're going to be lunch. But that episode is done in 4 minutes. But our life today, we're stressed for like months at a time. We can't pay our rent. Our boss is a jerk. We have things that stress us out for longer periods of time, so our body can get stuck in that fight or flight state for a very long time. In this study on the autonomic dysfunction and sleep disorders, they say that there's a bi-directional relationship between the sleep-wake system and the ANS. Chronic disruptions through the different stages of sleep lead to dysregulation of the autonomic functions, while dysfunction in autonomic coordination impairs the initiation and maintenance of sleep. So they're basically saying that if somebody isn't sleeping right, that's going to stress the body out and push them more into the sympathetic side of that autonomic nervous system. And if there's already dysregulation in that autonomic nervous system, that has the ability to restrict a person's ability to get to sleep or to stay asleep. So if someone is stuck in this sympathetic state most of the time, how would they possibly sleep? There's no scenario where you would run away from a lion while you're taking a nap. The body would have no reason to optimize for both of those activities at the same time. So if a person's body chemistry is stuck in this sympathetic state, they're going to have a hard time sleeping. And one way that you can get an idea if this is a problem for you is, again, you can look at your blood pressure. And if you take that systolic number, which is the top number, and subtract the diastolic number, that gives us what's called a pulse pressure. And if that pulse pressure is greater than 46, that can be a sign that a person is leaning too far on that sympathetic fight or flight side. And again, this is not a diagnostic issue, but this is one of those reasons when we look at those things where the study was looking at all the correlations between the cardiovascular markers. A lot of these cardiovascular issues are going to show a higher blood pressure. And when that blood pressure is higher, that pulse pressure is also usually going to be higher. See, and it's going to be another sign that, oh wow, this person could be really leaning in a sympathetic state. And why wouldn't the body be leaning more in that fight or flight state with all of these things that are going wrong when blood pressure is really high? Blood pressure doesn't go high because your dad's blood pressure was high. It's not just an accidental thing. There's things going wrong that is causing that pressure to go at a higher rate. So usually those things going wrong are concerning to the body and pushing that body into a stressed, sympathetic mode that's going to change how it operates and move it out of a state where it would be really good at sleeping and rebuilding and repairing and those types of functions. But if this body is stuck in an emergency state, do you think you're going to drink some chamomile tea and sleep through the night? Why would that happen? It's not going to change how the body's operating just because you gave it some nice, delicious tea. It's not going to work that way. So we're going to talk another thing about this sympathetic marker that we looked at with the blood pressure in just a second. But the next possible issue we can look at is oxygen utilization issues. So it's very important for the blood to stay in a balanced pH range. And you'll hear a lot of pH gurus out there like, oh, everybody's so acidic, they're going to die, you need to alkalize, eat an alkalizing diet. And there's a lot of fiction that goes on in that world. We have videos on that. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to dig into that a little bit more. But what's important when we're looking at insomnia issues is that when that blood leans too far on the alkaline side, what's called the Bohr effect kicks in. And this helps us understand that in this state, oxygen has a hard time leaving the blood and getting down to the tissues where it's need to be so the body can utilize it correctly. It's kind of like that oxygen gets stuck in the bloodstream when the blood is leaning too far on that alkaline side. So one thing we can do to get an idea of where is our blood pH, and again, this is not diagnostic, this is just giving us an opportunity to get an idea of how our body might be operating, is we can look at our breath rate, the rate at which we're breathing. So we can just try to relax and set the little timer on your phone for 60 seconds and then just count the number of inhales that you take in that 60 seconds. And that can give you an idea of what's going on because basically the CO2 that our body creates is acidic. And when the bloodstream starts to lean too far on the acidic side or too far on the alkaline side, one of the backup mechanisms that the body has is that it will adjust the rate at which we're breathing in an effort to either hold on to more CO2 to help acidify that bloodstream some more, or to try to huff off more CO2 if the blood is leaning too far on the acidic side. So if a person's breath rate is really slow and low, that can be an indication that the blood is leaning too far on that alkaline side, so the body is trying to slow the rate at which it's breathing to hold on to more CO2 to help acidify that blood so that oxygen can get down to the tissues where it's supposed to be. So the body is not so stupid. So when we're looking at this, a balanced breath rate would be about 14. If you're doing 14 breaths per minute, that's pretty balanced. Anything below 12 can be an indication that the pH of the blood is leaning a little bit more on this alkaline side and oxygen is trapped in the bloodstream. So if that's the case for you, that's something else that can really stress the body out. It really wants to be able to utilize oxygen correctly. We all know that oxygen is kind of a big deal, that we kind of need that just to be alive. So the body stresses about that as well. So when that breath rate is going low, that can be a sign that the body is stressing, and that when you're trying to sleep, the body is a little bit stressed and it's moving into this fight or flight state because it doesn't know how do I fix this? How can I make this so that the body gets the oxygen that it needs and is able to utilize that? And the doctor might put like a pulse oximeter on your finger and be like, ah man, your oxygen is great, way to go. But if your breath rate is really low and that bloodstream is leaning too alkaline, the oxygen can't get to where it needs to be utilized. It's there, great job, but it can't be utilized, and that's a significant problem. So to get an idea of this, if this overly alkaline blood situation is stressing the body out more, you can take that pulse pressure number that you got before by subtracting the diastolic from the systolic in your blood pressure. You can take that pulse pressure number and divide your breath rate. So if your breath rate is 10, you would divide that into that pulse pressure number. Maybe that was, 46, 47, something like that. And if the result of that, dividing the breath rate into that number, is higher than 3, then that can be an indication that the body is leaning too far on that sympathetic side. So a person might be having a pulse pressure that's in a good range. Maybe it's, 35 or something like that. But their breath rate is like 8. Well, when you divide that, that's a lot higher than 3. So that can be another indication that maybe the body's stressed, even if that blood pressure is in a good range. And the final thing that we'll consider is just the body's ability for energy production. And the body should be able to make energy through glucose or through fat. So we should be able to burn stored fat when there's not any glucose available so that the body has a backup fuel source. But for a wide variety of reasons, some people are really stuck where their body just really wants to burn glucose and it's not able to burn fat very well. And some people will be stuck where it's really only able to burn fat for fuel and it can't burn glucose very well. Like a type 2 diabetic is not properly processing glucose because the cells have become resistant to that insulin. So it's not really listening to the insulin and they can't process glucose very well. So they're kind of stuck in that fat burning mode. But to sleep, we really want to be able to process both types of fuel. And if a person is not be able to process fats, but they're eating all these carbohydrates that their body can't process, that high insulin has the ability to restrict their ability to access that stored fat. So they'll go to bed and they'll run out of glucose, or maybe their body can't access glucose and it doesn't have the ability to access fat, and they'll run out of fuel and the body will freak out and say, hey, wake up and go do something about this. So this energy production can be a problem for some people when it comes to their sleep. We really want the body to be able to process both types of fuels correctly. And that book that I told you how to get for free really digs into understanding how to figure out if one's leaning too far in one direction and how to fix those problems if that's going on. So now to understand why people have such a hard time fixing their insomnia, let's look at some of the common and more popular remedies that people use and understand why would that really help somebody and why would it not help somebody else and why would it even make somebody else even worse. So the first one we want to look at is melatonin. And basically this kind of almost is viewed as like, oh, this is like sleep hormone kind of thing. We need this to kind of sleep. And the problem with this is that the body makes this melatonin when it moves into this anabolic state. So if someone's really stuck in a catabolic state, they're going to have a hard time making melatonin. So if they're to supplement with melatonin when they're dealing with this catabolic state, then that could really help them sleep. But if someone is not having sleep because of another reason, maybe an anabolic imbalance where the body is making melatonin fine, that's not really going to do much for them. And when the body sees this coming in, it'll say like, oh, this melatonin is coming in, I don't need to make as much. So they might sleep better initially because they have the melatonin that the body was making plus this extra that was coming in. So that's a lot. That's really going to help them sleep. And then after a few weeks, they're not sleeping well anymore. What happened? Oh, I must need to take more melatonin. Well, the body stopped making as much because you were bringing it in. So you're not really fixing the underlying cause. When someone's not making enough melatonin, it's usually because they're stuck in this catabolic state. So we want to work to improve that catabolic imbalance instead of just giving the body melatonin. Magnesium, get ready to cuss at me. Go in the comments, oh no, that can't be true. Magnesium, blah, 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 blah. Here's the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to insomnia. Magnesium. So if someone takes magnesium, they always take it at night and oh my gosh, that made me sleep. I slept so well when I took that. Somebody else takes it and they don't sleep for a month and a half. Magnesium as a mineral happens to be one of the most pro-catabolic minerals that there is. So someone stuck in this catabolic state, they're going to take magnesium, they're lighting their imbalance on fire. They're magnifying this catabolic problem by 30. So magnesium is one of the worst ideas for some people when it comes to sleep. So let's understand, why does it help some people sleep then? Well, if someone's really stuck in this anabolic state severely, way over there like we talked about, we want to help pull those people at least a little bit out of that anabolic imbalance. Bring them down so that they're not processing their glucose so aggressively and creating such a hard sugar crash when they have any type of carbs or sugars. So magnesium will pull them out of that anabolic state a little bit and help repair that dysfunction a little bit. here's something else. If they're also electrolyte deficient, where there's not enough minerals in the body, they're giving their body minerals. They're lifting the mineral levels in the body. Now the body has a better buffer system. So magnesium is viewed like, oh, it's this calming mineral. Let's be calm. We want to be calm when we go to sleep. And the reality is at the tissue level, magnesium has the ability to calm those tissues, has the ability to help those tissues relax. And if you have a lack of magnesium, and usually it's calcium involved in this too, you'll get like charley horses and cramps and things like that because there's not enough of those minerals at the tissue level to allow them to relax. And that can cause a person to feel very tense. So when they take magnesium and they give that body that magnesium, that can help them feel more relaxed. So all of that is true. So let's say that magnesium really does help you sleep because you're electrolyte deficient. Maybe you're leaning too anabolic, too hypoglycemic. That has the ability to improve all of those issues. But you're still working against your body's natural circadian rhythm. You're pushing the body more into that catabolic state at night when it's supposed to be in more of an anabolic state. So instead, if you took that magnesium in the morning, now you're pushing your body more in the catabolic state. You're repairing this imbalance where you're way over here, stuck in that anabolic state, but you're doing it at a time that your body wants you to do it. Their body wants to be in a more catabolic state during the day so that all of those daytime catabolic activities can take place more efficiently. So that's what we want to do with magnesium, is take it in the morning or maybe with lunch, and that can help them sleep. So to understand this a little bit better, let's talk about one of these other remedies, which is, wow, that was a really big check mark. I didn't even know how I did that. That was kind of cool. I won't be able to do that again. But glycine is an amino acid that happens to be pro-anabolic. So it's going to push a body more into that anabolic state. So a lot of people say, I sleep best if I use magnesium glycinate, but not so much if I use magnesium citrate. Well, magnesium glycinate is magnesium bound to glycine. It's bound to this pro-anabolic amino acid. So they're kind of decreasing that pro-catabolic effect of the magnesium and helping their body at least stay in a little bit more of a pro-anabolic state with the glycine. And they're also giving the body both amino acids and minerals that can help it function a little bit better at night. But the more effective step would be to take magnesium in the morning when the body should be in a more catabolic state and take some glycine at night. Now you're really boosting the body's ability to move back and forth between those two circadian rhythm states like the body is supposed to. Vitamin D. Vitamin D has the ability to help us pull calcium out of the intestinal tract into the bloodstream so the body can use all that calcium. It's crucial for that. Vitamin D is very important for that. But when you increase your dose, now you're going to pull even more calcium from the intestinal tract into the bloodstream, but you may also pull calcium from other places and kind of hold it in the bloodstream when that dose goes high, and that's going to have the ability to thicken up the bloodstream and thicken up and raise that blood pressure because now the blood is thicker and you need more pressure to push it through the system. So that's going to help some people with an electrolyte deficiency feel and function a whole lot better. The problem is once you start getting too much, you have the ability to kind of magnify that problem where someone is hypoglycemic and processing their glucose too much. So I don't like to see real high doses of vitamin D if somebody's having sleep trouble. But with an electrolyte deficiency, that could be helpful. Now, if someone is in this sympathetic state because their blood pressure is too high, vitamin D has the ability to magnify by pulling more calcium into the bloodstream. Now there's more things that are thickening up that bloodstream and raising that blood pressure. So that is not such a great idea for that guy down there. Are you getting what I'm kind of showing you here? That there isn't a solution for insomnia because we really need to look at the person instead of the symptom that they're dealing with. Glutamine. Glutamine is a pro-anabolic amino acid, and it also happens to be have the ability to slightly raise blood pressure for some people. So if someone's really electrolyte deficient and really catabolic, then this glutamine could be like magic for them. This is where I was. I was extremely catabolic and very electrolyte deficient. So that's what was causing my insomnia. So glutamine was like my best friend. That really helped me a lot. And keep in mind that, you know, your life can change. Things can happen to maybe events or maybe a way that you're eating can create or improve an imbalance. And whatever's causing your insomnia could be different from time to time. Like I sleep great now because I don't have this catabolic imbalance or this electrolyte deficiency imbalance anymore. But if something really stresses me out, then I might not sleep as well that night because I'm pushed more into this sympathetic state. So it makes sense that I wouldn't sleep as well. Something really caused me a lot of stress, like maybe I went to the grocery store and I asked, hey, what aisle are the diapers on? And the employee, she looked me up and down and she said, oh, you mean adult diapers for males? They're over on 11. No, I don't mean adult diapers. I have a little kid. How old do you think I am? Aisle 11. Your ears are weird looking. So if I'm stressed, I might not sleep as well that night. So glutamine would not be good if someone was stuck in a sympathetic state because that could magnify that problem and it has the ability to help these other problems. Glutamine is also very pro-anabolic, so if someone was in an anabolic state, having a hard time from being too anabolic, that would really magnify that problem for them and make them much worse. Ashwagandha is very good if someone is really stuck in this sympathetic fight or flight state. It has the ability to calm that system down a little bit. And one thing we really want to look at is these sleep formulas. And when you go and you're like, oh, I'm going to find a sleep formula on Amazon and it's going to help me sleep. And when you look at the ingredients in the formulas, they basically take everything that they've ever heard of ever helping anyone sleep better and they put it all in that formula. There you go. Sleep it up real nice. They don't understand that they're putting all these ingredients that are working against each other. They're like canceling each other out. It's almost like you're trying to drive your car around with your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. Slam down as hard as you can. If you've never tried that, I'll let you know it doesn't go great. So when we're looking at formulas, they're usually not going to be a great idea unless a person is just so deficient that this formula is just putting a bunch of stuff in there and just giving the body some tools it can utilize, then they might help a person sleep. But usually the sleep formulas are pretty awful and not a great route to go. Because again, a person is trying to use a remedy instead of addressing the actual underlying cause that is creating trouble for that person. So I hope that helps you understand some of those things. I also help you understand that it might not be so easy to figure this out. This is going to take work. It takes work to look at your body chemistry, to run self-tests, to get an idea of what imbalances might be creating this trouble so that you know what steps are going to be appropriate for you. If you're just throwing darts at the remedy dartboard, well, I think you're going to be throwing darts for a really long time. I know that I was. So we want to work to help people understand how to figure out the underlying cause for them and address that. Now, on top of that, this is really the answer for insomnia, is fixing these imbalances. But there are still things that you can do in your life that could help you sleep at least a little bit better. There's things you can put in your favor. When you can't sleep, you want to put anything you can in your favor just to try to sleep better while you're working on correcting these actual underlying causes. So I made another video of simple things to do, just simple things that you could do easily. This is going to take work. These things are going to be easy. They're not going to fix the actual underlying cause. They're not going to fix your insomnia, but you might find one that helps you sleep at least a little bit better while you're working on fixing the underlying cause. So you can jump over right now and check out our video on tools to sleep better naturally. I can't wait to hear about your results.